Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the show. I am very glad that you are here. I'm actually talking today with Wendy Rivera from Eva Loren and Do You Speak Bride, the Do You Speak Bride organization. So, Wendy, I'm going to get you to give us just a quick little background on yourself here in just a second. But we actually had a previous episode, I think it was episode number 36, where we talked with Wendy. And guys, it blew up. It was one of the most incredible conversations that I've ever had with an interviewee, or I guess if you want to call it a guest. But it touched me personally, and there was a lot of information I took from that episode, and I actually applied it to my own life with my relationship that I have with my wife. And so, you know, I Wendy, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you coming back, how much I appreciate your time. It really means the world. So let's go ahead and kick this off. Tell us just a little bit about you and who Wendy Rivera is.
Oh, goodness. Well, hi, Nathan. It's so great to be here. I loved our conversation last time, and I think that the world needs to know, if you want to have a fun conversation, come talk to Nathan, because he has the energy, and the questions that he asks and how engaged he is in the whole process just pulls the best out of you. So when he was like, hey, can we do another one? I was like, are you kidding? Yes. That's like, you know, going to the spa for a day. You come away feeling rejuvenated. Yeah, that's a conversation with Nathan. So I'm so happy to be here. So when you say tell who Wendy Rivera is, I think in a nutshell, maybe the best introduction would be, I could be described mostly as an empath, which is I feel into the feelings of other people, and in such a like palpable way. Like I can't turn it off. And those of you out there who are empaths, you understand as well. But you just do. You feel into it. You walk into a room and you can feel the dynamics relationally with people. And so growing up, that was very much my strength and also my weakness, where I cared too much about what other people felt and thought, and had trouble navigating what I felt and thought sometimes. But it's the strength of it is where you can really feel into the perspective of another and help them. And so it works well when you're in a position of a coach. Like I love to coach sports. I loved when I conducted a choir. It helped with conducting a choir because I'm feeling into what's stopping this person from opening their mouth to sing, and then helping to, empower them to move forward and be more vulnerable. So it helps to create safe spaces for people, I think. And so in my life, that's where the positions I have found myself in, with learning to lead by serving, and having that ability to feel into people help my ability to serve them well. So when it came to brides, that became such a fun space to be, to have those skills in, and to employ those skills. And there's so many different people that you meet. There's so many different family relationships going on, and everything is heightened emotionally. And, there's so many goals they're trying to reach. And so to feel into each person and come up with an understanding that, wait a minute, there are so many similarities between how brides operate or moms operate. So many similarities in their fears, so many similarities in their hopes, and all the things. So I could then find patterns in what I was doing to help them, and be able to teach those patterns to other people that maybe are looking at brides and going, why are you behaving that way? I totally don't get your perspective at all. Or moms, or maid of honors, or whatever it is. And so there's such a disconnect. And when there's a disconnect, conflict happens, and then misunderstandings happen, and then generalizations happen, and then bitterness sets in, and jadedness sets in, and then it turns into, I'm going to take advantage of you, and you're not going to take advantage of me. And and when I stepped into the wedding industry and found that, I so wanted to help. Perceptions be correct, so that communication could be clear, and conflict could lessen. So anyway, that's, I think, the best description of how it began and how it grew to where it is. So it was fun to start our own shop and apply all the things that I felt and thought and studied and understood into that, and then to help other wedding professionals do the same.
Yeah, well, and so that's actually how you and I connected, was because you are helping other wedding professionals do the same. We connected at a conference that occurred last year here in Greenville, South Carolina, and it was your talk was just fantastic. And it was at that point I was like, I've got to talk with her. Like so I just want to applaud you, because it's obvious that all of that is 100% true. That is not fluff. Your ability to be that extreme empath be able to dig in with somebody and to help them. It's 100% true. It's not fluff. It's not just a resume filler. Like that's 100% true. And it's evident every time that I get with you and every time I talk to you, I'm like, I want to spend more time with this person.
That's funny. I feel the same. That's why with you, I'm like, as an empath, when I said, you open up good conversation and the way you respond fuels it. Well, that's how it is for me. Like, you've got that right focus and energy and desire. And it just makes me go, yeah, let's talk for weeks. Let's go, And I don't know if I can help, but if we can talk, we'll figure some things out. I'm pretty sure. So,
so now that we've pumped each other up and now we're feeling pretty good.
I don't care if anybody else is listening. Nathan and I
I know. I think we can just keep doing that forever.
Right.
So let's, so our last conversation, I was actually going back this week and I was listening to it and it was very powerful. And it actually reminded me a lot. I want to encourage anybody who's listening to this right now, go back and listen to that original conversation after this, before this, whatever you want to do. It doesn't matter. But go back and listen to that conversation as well. It was very powerful for a number of reasons. The two biggest things that we kind of talked about was through the wedding planning process, what is the mindset that a bride, a groom, a couple should have going through that process? What should they be thinking about and what should they be focused on through that process? But we also talked a little bit about like how to interact with the wedding professionals, who's the team that you're putting together, right? And how to approach that and how to work through those things. It was very, very great. It was a wonderful conversation. So much learned. What I want to talk about today, and I want to, like, all that's happened, very successful process getting to the wedding. You had the wedding of your dreams. It was incredible, right? Like, maybe a few things went wrong, but the wedding of your dreams. Let's talk about the day after. Let's talk about the week after, the month after, the year after, right? Because I think that there is a shift that can tend to happen through the year after the process or the year after the wedding. And, all those things that you were talking about earlier where conflict can kind of enter into the scenario. I want to talk about what happens after the wedding and your approach to relationships, your approach to how you've kind of spent your time, maybe even working with brides after the wedding as well. So let's dive into that just a little bit. What's your concepts around or your frameworks around like how do you handle marriage when you're actually married?
Yeah, exactly. It's such a great question. And I do feel like this is going to be, good luck to your editor, because I think we're going to have a lot to talk about in this. It's such a wide open field. Also, I don't pause much, so it makes it difficult for editors too. Sorry. But we've helped with and seen this new thing come on the scenes called Bride Life. And I would suggest you guys checking that out as well, because this concept I think is important. Right now, as you're planning your wedding, you are actually creating patterns in your relationship and you don't even know it sometimes. So if you can recognize and on purpose create some patterns during that time, then it will serve you well once you are beyond your wedding. It will really serve you well. There is a lot in this time period, this journey of what I call bride country that you're walking through up to the day of your wedding, where you have certain expectations. Some are met, some are not. You have certain hopes. You have certain relational family struggles that you can go through. You have decisions that you have to make together, both financially and taste-wise. I mean, there are so many opportunities for a couple to either jive together, or like my friend who grew up in Greenville would always say, it's either going to barbecue or mildew. And that's exactly what it is. Like, you're going to barbecue or mildew during this time frame together. And a lot of times we're just living life, and so we don't realize what we're doing are creating some patterns that can last later, or some expectations. There's a verse of scripture that says, hope deferred makes the heart sick. In other words, like, your expectations being one thing, if they're not actually met, it's not a mental necessarily effect as much as it is your emotions that are affected. It makes your heart sick. So then you have to look at your emotions about it, and why did I feel that way? Why did I respond that way? Oh my goodness. It's because certain expectations were there. So all of those things are inside the journey of leading to your wedding. So I would say, you can look at it and go, okay, how are we going to on purpose sit and talk about these things? How are we going to approach conflict when we don't agree? How are we going to approach the decisions we make financially? And instead of letting it immediately digress to a struggle or a fight or a conflict or a misunderstanding of the other person's motives and desires, and then doubt your whole relationship because now I'm not sure if we do make decisions well. I don't even know why he doesn't care enough to want to spend that on flowers. Doesn't he know what those flowers mean? Those flowers mean this, this, and this. That flower means this. This flower means this. And he's rejecting them. Does he even, like, we can jump to these big ramifications of things that are just communication things. So if you approach it like a on purpose relational coach in a way where you're like, okay, perfect. We're not seeing this here. First, I'm going to state to you, and here's a pattern maybe you write down as a couple because this can really serve you well later. First, I'm going to state to you what I know of you that is unchangeable. Unchangeable. I know these things about you, and I'm going to say them. So let's, for instance, I know that you, one of the things you value so much is, let's see what, I just talked to a bride just the other day, and she talked about how they met, and he bought her, he came up to her at this place, and he bought her the drink special of the night. And it was really expensive, and she was only 21, and so she would have never bought it. And she couldn't believe that he did that. He didn't even know her yet. And she just was like, that's like somebody giving me a car, a complete stranger giving me a car is what it felt like. And it was so amazing. And then he forgot to get her number. So he ended up throwing a party so she would come to it so he could get her number. So a lot of expense and time and, making this big thing so she would come and then get her number again. But fast forward to, this is now 6.5 years later where they're engaged and planning their wedding. And he wants to spend on certain things and she wants to pull him back on spending on things. She's like, well, wait, now we got to budget better. We got to budget better, da, da, da. And just that one statement, I was saying, you know what? Let me throw this out there for you to consider. He is somebody who clearly, if he sees something that is valuable to his life, he sees something, whether it's enjoyable or delightful or, something that he wants to celebrate that moment of or whatnot. He clearly has no problem spending on that. That's why he bought you the specialty drink. And guess what? That investment paid off for him. So like the investment of that party paid off for him. If you were to ask
he was rewarded.
He was rewarded. Yeah. So he's like, this is a good way to operate. My life is better because I know how to choose these moments to actually lavishly spend a little bit. And so it's that he values certain things and it has given a return. So if you now look at his spending habits and act like he's foolish, because there will be some weaknesses that are associated with that strength in him. Our strength is always connected to our weakness. So he may have a lavishly spending issue, but it also is a strength. So if you speak to him based on what you know of his strength and know of his values and and that you love how he values those things, and you say that to him first, and you're not just saying it to him to butter him up, you're saying it out loud so that you process it before you say the next cautionary thing you're going to say to them. You need to process it because you need to fully look at, and this I have found, I don't know if any of you guys out there have found this. I find that is, if I don't do that on purpose, I can so easily go, you are just a crazy spender. Like, what is your problem? And I focus on the weakness and I can't see a strength in it. So I have to on purpose go, no, check that. Let's look at who I know this person to be on the core of them, the inside of them, and see where this has shown up as a strength and really soak that in as a person. Then I'm going to look at this corresponding weakness and be able to help speak into it because I haven't doubted their core. They're not a crazy spender. They're not a frivolous spender. They are someone who doesn't hold on to money in such a way that says the money's more important than the moment. They think the moment's more important than the money. That's incredible, and that's an amazing strength. So say that to your partner of what you know about them and what you love about them, and then say, in this scenario, are you thinking that the value is this because of this? Or are you wanting to spend this because maybe you're like, well, they had this DJ and I don't want to have a cheap DJ. I want to have an expensive DJ to show off to my friends. Is it your friends that you're worried about, or is it that the content of what this DJ does? Or does that make sense? Like asking more questions than assuming you get it, I think is key.
So I love that. So I'll be a little vulnerable for a second. I think one of the challenges that happened with my wife and I, maybe like year 4, year 5, was that we always avoided conflict, right?
Yes.
And the downside of avoiding conflict, and I don't mean conflict in a bad way,
I
where
know.
like a fight or but just any kind of conflict where we felt like if we were to say what was bothering us or start to talk or initiate a conversation about what was bothering us, we would it would lead to something bad.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And the downside of that is we ended up not talking. Like and
Yes.
we went for a stretch where things got kind of rough because there was no communication. Not even bad communication. There was no communication, right?
Yeah.
What I love about what you're saying so much is you're providing a framework and you're kind of providing the tools to be able to initiate that conversation without it leading to a bad outcome, without it leading to a conflict in the worst sense of the word.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
Um,
Yes. And
so I
no,
go ahead.
as you were saying, it made me think, your initial question about the day after. When I think about this in communicating through conflict, communicating through misunderstandings or whatnot, there's so many areas that this can creep up. And the day after the
Mm,
wedding, couples can respond very differently. I mean, the weeks following
mm,
the wedding, the bride has been planning for many times over a year. And because of all the situations of the last year, sometimes they've been planning for 2.5 years.
mm,
And so the expectation and the hope and the hype or whatever it is, that just the longing for this day to be perfect, whether it's perfect or not, there's a come down afterwards where she needs to, and maybe it's the groom, he was so involved as well, it could be either one, it could, whichever side of the partnership, but they want to relive and soak up the joys, and sometimes they're hyper focused on the things that didn't go well, and but they want to relive so much of it and they want to do it right away. That's why photographers, I'm sure you have felt this pressure. There's certain pictures they want
yeah.
right away. They've got to be
Right.
able to have it in their hands almost as they're leaving the wedding. Where's my pictures,
Right.
and so
Right.
reliving, and then posting, and then that type of thing, whereas the rest of the world immediately wants to move on. In fact,
Mm.
many times one of the partners is so excited that was done. And I'm going to put a generalization out here, so if you don't fit into this category, no worries, but most of the time
I
guys
feel like I know what's coming.
yeah. Most of the time guys are like, that's done, okay, next, let's go on to the next challenge. And they're feeling the responsibility of, oh, we're married, okay, so now I'm going to even ramp it up more at work, and I'm going to make sure financially we're this, and I'm going to whatever, they've got this next dragon to slay. And
Mm,
the wedding, they did well and they pat themselves on the back, and now they're going to their next challenge.
mm,
And it just feels like, wait a minute, sometimes the bride is like, no, wait a minute, this was amazing, we nailed it, we're the best ever, and the world needs to
mm.
know we're the best ever. And do you know what I mean? There's all of those things connected. So coming down off of it, I find that, side note, when we're helping brides find their dress, if their sister or friend or aunt or mom got married in the last 2 years, they want to talk about it. They want to be at
Right.
this bride's appointment and they want to talk about it. Why? They they don't
Mm,
want it to be eclipsed by anybody else. They're still a bride in their minds, and their wedding still needs to be the best thing that ever happened. So
huh.
they almost want to define everyone else's stuff by theirs so that they can still be the gold standard sometimes. So they can say, well,
Huh.
at my wedding, we did at my wedding, and when I found my dress, and they're still wanting their story to be validated. And it just shows it doesn't stop after the wedding, brides. As you're leading up to your wedding, it's going to continue. You're going to want to relive it and want the world to say that was amazing. And you need that consistent validation. For us, and this is for the wedding professionals listening, for us, what's key when that happens, when a aunt or sister or whatever friend says, but my wedding was this and this and this, is to take a second, listen to it, be excited about it, and then say, that is amazing. I love that. I love that story. And you know what I think is so cool is, and this, by the way, I'm still talking to this person. What I think is so cool is that every story is so unique. Like no one gets to have your story. Yours is so incredible, and I love it. And that's why I'm so glad you're here too, because you get how unique that is. And the way that she's going to find her dress is so cool to watch. And so I'm glad you're going to be here to see it, because it's going to be so different than anybody else's. And give that space to the bride that's a bride right now. And you're doing it in such a way that doesn't say, sweetie, your wedding's done. This is now her wedding, and it's time to focus on her. It's saying, no, your story is so valuable that no one's will be exactly like it. It's its own special thing. And so we've celebrated it. Now we get to watch this one and see how unique this is. So guess what? Mom cried when you found your dress. It doesn't mean at all that mom will cry when she finds hers. Who knows when the crying will happen, you know? So we can think there are certain things that, oh, when mom cries, that's how we know it's the dress. Not so. Like this bride might not cry at all until they see their venue. And then they cry. Who knows?
Right.
You know, so it's cool to watch and free everyone to have their own story. So to grooms and brides, sorry to digress, but back after the wedding, if your partner is wanting to spend more time looking at that wedding, don't try to encourage them to put it down and move on with real life yet. In fact, anytime that there is an incredible high of joy, why not give it some space? And the more space you give it, the easier it is to have a runway into the rest of life and have that joy continue. But like if you try to stifle it, muffle it, you know, or put a muzzle on it and say, no, we're going this direction now, that emotion needs to go somewhere. And instead of being free to affect things in a positive way, it will turn from joy to resentment to you for not letting them share the joy. It's the same with a negative emotion. You know, if we're not free to share that negative emotion, then it just goes bottled up and it gets deeper in and can turn negative towards you. So that becomes a barrier. Any emotion that's felt, give it freedom, lean into it, and then take them to in that strength to the next step that they need to go into, you know?
And that's such great advice. God, I'm thinking even before the wedding, because I really want to highlight and put a pin in this concept of the habits that you're building through the wedding planning process will take you on for the rest of your life. I think that's what's really interesting. I'll give another generalization, which isn't always the case, but typically the wedding planning process does kind of lean on the bride, right? It does kind of lean on the bride to do all the planning, kind of all of making all the decisions. Generally, the guy is a little bit more disengaged, right? Yeah. Do you want to kind of speak to that? Maybe how that influences as far as habit building, right? Yeah. How maybe that influences things into the wedding day, and then afterwards, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah. It's so you're right on a huge one. I feel like that's such a great question, because right now I'm just playing so many scenarios in our minds of like the guy sitting at home after work and he's watching TV, and she is totally on Pinterest and on Instagram, and she is still planning and she wants to talk about, but are these napkins the same as this one, and do you like this texture better and this print better and blah blah blah, and he's like, are you kidding me? I don't care at all.
I don't care.
Exactly. And now I'm hating you for caring. Like, what have I done? And then their mindset honestly could go to, I can't wait for this wedding to be over so this kind of conversation can be over. But to a degree, there are going to be some things she'll behave similarly in after the wedding. So it's such a good question. That's right, that this pattern is being established. I would say if you're in that where there's such a disconnect, that's again the generalization of the groom saying, okay, I've got the rehearsal dinner, my bachelor party, I got those things done. I know what suit I'm wearing. I'm good to go. Great. And she continues to talk about it. She will talk about it more and more and more and more in a way the more disengaged you are. So if there's a way that even you could say, okay, so when I come home from work, maybe we could establish a pattern to where, all right, we'll have supper, and during supper, we're going to talk about whatever things that we want to talk about. If you want to talk about the wedding, we'll talk about the wedding. But then we're going to take like 45 minutes or an hour or 30 minutes or whatever it is that you want to put on it. And let me hear all that you're thinking about the wedding. And let me, bounce it off of me if you want to, or the things that you're excited about. And let's focus on there. And then, you know what I mean? And then have that be a set time to where she knows, okay, this is when I get to talk about all the things, and just give her access somehow to being able to
Mm.
communicate with you where you're listening. You're not doing something
Mm.
else. You are tapped in. And then also,
Mm.
I would say to the bride side, we talked about this on our podcast before together, Nathan, where the bride can be like thinking she can throw something out easily while he's focused on something else and that he'll retain it. And so then she gets mad that he doesn't remember it. And guys tend to be single taskers. So like if they're
Yes.
doing something, if he's watching a television show, I'm sorry, he can say, "Uh-huh, yep, no, that's great, babe. That's great." And he hasn't heard a thing you're saying. And so you have to choose your moments of when you're sharing things with him so that he is listening and that it's valuable to listen to. If you want to set up patterns of your partner listening to you, then be conscious of the value that you're bringing to that actual connection. Be conscious of what you're saying. Don't just be, and we try to teach this to our kids, right? They'll ramble on and on and on about something that's like no one cares about. And to a degree, you give them leeway, but at a certain point in their life, you're like, okay, sweetie, when you're telling a story, not all the details are really important. Think about how your audience is receiving it. And to you, this detail is super important. To them, not so much. So like,
Mm.
if you want to be a good conversationalist, know how to move it forward, ask good questions, to engage the other person. So we're teaching our kids this.
Yeah.
In this process of planning, it's a relational skill. So brides, the guys actually want to be engaged in it. So you've got to be able to communicate to them why these things are important to you. And if you need help, I guarantee you, especially at this point in your relationship, they want to help. So if you can just crystallize it down to something you actually want their input on and help for, but also don't just talk and not expect help.
Right.
If you're conflicted about the napkins and it's so big to you that this is what it needs to be, to him, he's like, I'll come in and save the day. Sure. That one. Gives no thought to it whatsoever and just solves it so it can go on. It's almost insulting to her. She's like, you
Mm.
haven't even felt this napkin. You don't understand why I might have liked that napkin. And do you know what I'm saying? So like being able to see that other person's tendencies and go, okay, if I'm going to put a problem out there, do I want a solution or do I want him just to listen? Do I
Mm.
do I need him just to be somebody I'm bouncing things off of and then thank him for giving me that? Or do I want to put those problems out there? He tries to solve it. I get mad at him. He gets mad at me for never solving. And now that's a new pattern that we're going to do next time, every time. We're not coming to a solution. You know what I mean? So
Mm.
I think communicate what you want from the other person. And then on the one side to be able to say, here's the time frame where we'll talk about this. And I know it'll spill over into other parts of the day, but I just want you to know I want to give you undivided attention. And so talk to
Mm.
me for all the things you need to talk about. This time is absolutely set aside for you. Other times I'm not saying you can't talk to me. Please talk to me. But I just want you to know, for me, you're a priority, and that's why it's here. And how you
I love
communicate,
that.
that's important too. You don't want to be like, I'm putting this here because you keep talking about it. Don't. So we're going to have an hour. That's it. Be done.
Right.
So like,
Right. God, so good. So good. And to some extent, I'm kind of making this mental connection in my head between what we're talking about now, and that whole thing that you said earlier, which is a person's greatest strength also tends to be their greatest weakness,
yes,
right?
yes.
And recognizing that fact. I mean, the fact that maybe he comes in and he says, this one, like, this is the napkin. Let's go with this.
Yes.
Like, also recognizing the fact that that is kind of a strength.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
in his world, he's got a problem, and as quickly as he can, he makes a decision and he goes for
Yes.
it. Like, that kind of decisiveness, like, that's a great business owner, right? like that's
Absolutely, it is.
like there's a ton of positives
Yes.
in the fact that he's able to walk into a situation and not
Yes.
break down and be able to make a quick decision, not necessarily because he doesn't care,
Right.
but because he's just making the best he's making the best decision he can with the information that's presented to
That's
him.
right.
That's a huge strength.
It's a huge strength.
In my mind, I'm sitting there thinking like the connection between, because that's something that's a concept I've never heard before, is a person's greatest strength can also tend to be
Yes.
their greatest weakness. Like,
Yes.
I've never thought about that before, but it is so true.
Oh, it's
like
so true.
there is a downside to every strength that a person has.
Oh my goodness. Listen, personally, I am a big picture visionary person. And I think it's funny.
Yeah.
It's almost reflected in my physical ability as well. Like I don't see details well with my eyes, and I don't in my personality either. Like I feel very detailed into people's emotions, but as far as like, okay, this is a direction we're gonna go. Let's go in this direction, and then okay, don't bother me with all those little details about it. We're gonna
Mm.
go. Huge strength for so many things, but a huge weakness as well, and it's the two are connected. So what you're saying is so true about the guy who can come in and solve the problem, and I think that from my perspective, I'm so thankful if Gabe can come in and just be like that napkin, because when you said the wedding leans on the bride, I think that's a good way to describe it. It leans on the bride. In other words, it's yes, it's fun planning, but a lot of it is not. It's a burden where everybody throws it back. Well, you're the bride. What do you think? And you're like, oh, good grief. Like for me, I was like, I don't care about the details. I have the big picture. I've got Gabe. We've got the officiant. I have the dress I want. Let's do it. Like that, all the rest of the
Mm.
details, I hate, you know? So
Mm.
I so appreciated that coming in. But again, questions are so key in your relationship. Right now, as you're planning your
Mm.
wedding, and then after, ask questions. Ask questions. And I don't just mean like, well, what one do you want? I think a question of like, so as you're doing this, is it easier for you just to bounce it off of me, or do you want an opinion here? Right? And if I share the opinion, I think it's key that you know I'm just sharing it. And I know you can decide totally differently, and that's totally fine. Because you see, all the areas where relationships get hurt, he could come in, give his opinion, hasn't been asked for, hasn't actually been wanted, or he gives his opinion, she doesn't take it. Yeah, he gives
I've made that.
there
I've
you
made
go.
that
There
mistake
you
a lot
go.
of times.
It's so common
Right.
to all of us.
Right.
You know, we give an opinion and then the person doesn't take it. And then we're like, well, fine, don't ask my opinion again then. I gave you an answer and you didn't do
Yeah.
it. What are we doing? We're wasting time. No,
Mm.
we're in a relationship where we're bouncing things off, we're giving opinions, we're free to take them, we're free to not take them, and the person's core and the relationship itself is never in question. So if we
Mm.
only see our value in the relationship as the other person taking our advice always, or the other person doing what we want always, or we are the giver of advice, and that is our, you know, we're, our value in the relationship, and then that person doesn't take it, we're not happy, and we don't feel closer to them, and we're not as ready to give advice next time, you know. But if we say,
Right.
here's my perspective, I'm going to say it strongly, and I may say it with a stronger feel than as I'm trying to figure it out than what I want you to take from it. But this is what I see. But I know it's your decision, and I just need you to know I'm going to love you no matter what. I love you no
Mm.
matter what you choose here. You're going to choose well, and hopefully this helps. If you're prefacing and then giving advice, they're going to come to you again. That pulls you closer. It makes you communicate, I'm secure in who I am in this relationship and who you are. And we're going to come to the best solutions because we are secure together. So
Mm.
try to, and you know, those of us who've been married longer than 5 years, we understand like how many times we didn't do this and how it caused disconnects and how it caused further things, like we felt further away in our emotional connections. So if we could go back, and that's what we're trying to do, is tell the brides who are back there, start practicing this kind of communication, and then see how it does for your relationship.
It's so good. And what I'm sitting here thinking to myself is, year 5, year 7.
Yeah.
That tends to be some breaking points for a lot of marriages.
Wow.
That tends to, in year 10, like that tends to be some breaking points. And, you know, like I've talked to a lot of people. It's funny. I'm in this weird time in my life where the people that I grew up with, my friends coming up through college, we all kind of got married about the same time. Yeah. It's interesting. There's some relationships that have ended over the last couple of years. And it's funny that the theme that seems to always come up is, we just didn't feel close to each other. And what they're saying is like, they didn't feel emotionally connected like they used to. Right. It's funny, like all the tools that you're talking about right now, it seems like it's geared towards heading that problem off before it becomes a problem, before it feels irreparable, before it feels like you can't change it and you can't go back to the way you hear people say often, it's like, I wish I felt the way about her or him that I did when we got married. Wow. Like you hear that phrase being tossed around a lot, and that's what you're talking about, right? You're talking about how to not get to that point through just effective communication skills.
Yes. We have no concept really when we're getting married, of how life can, like, I almost see it as this, you're walking through and there's a lot of freedom and a lot of light. And then life tends to start building a tunnel around you, and it starts building that tunnel, and the light gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And when that light of hope and freedom goes completely out, the despair that sets in says the only solution is to just get out of this, like start again. Like there's no way. I don't see any more light. I don't see any more hope. And that's why and there's no way to reconnect. I'm like now in a tunnel away from everyone else. I can't connect to this person. I don't see them anymore. I don't feel them anymore. This can't be the best way to live my life. So I'm just gonna, the problem is, and like what you're saying, these skills, in my opinion, I see it almost like keeping the tunnel from being built. It keeps light able to come in, because there are enough things in this life that will pile onto your tunnel that have nothing to do with the two of you. And so you need the two of you to fight those things off to keep that light in your relationship. The rest of the world can be crazy and disconnected and pressure, and even extended family members can be going through a lot of issues and drama and even in attacking you as a couple. But if you as a couple have that light, have that freedom together, then you can weather anything. Nothing can put it on top. But the rest of the world could be perfect, and your relationship is the thing that's causing your light to go out. Then that is the thing that's almost impossible to change, or to feel hope about. So yes, these things I'm looking at and I'm like, how do we proactively avoid the deep hurts that happen between each other, that either go unsaid or that go so much said that they're just they're never solved. They're just used as weapons. How do we empower couples at the time in their life when they're so hopeful about love, that to notice patterns, create patterns on purpose, and have their relationship have this solidarity to it as it goes into the weather of life? I think is super key. I am passionate about, like I said at the beginning, avoiding unnecessary conflict and strengthening relationships. And I find that believing the best in the other is one of the first steps in doing so. So establish that as a mental pattern. When I see things in my partner that I don't understand, I'm going to first think about all the amazing and good and true things I know about them, and I will have that be unchangeable in my mind. I will solidify it again. It's unchangeable. From that, I will work to the things I don't understand, and make those understand so that I can align those back in what I do know to be true about them. And sometimes I will say, a person can forget what's true about them. A person can forget what's strong about them. And so for the person closest to them to verbalize to them in whatever ways they can what is strong about them can actually relight that fire inside them, where they go back towards being the best version of themselves. It's easy to forget who we are. And when we're leading up to our wedding, we look at the other person and we're like, you're the most amazing being that has ever walked the face of this earth, and I get to be with you. You've chosen me. Oh my goodness. Like, I get to live with you. And we feel that way. And then we go through and they start doing things that don't make sense to that description. And we're like, wait, you're not the most perfect? Okay, well, I don't understand this and I don't understand that. Did I make a wrong decision? Or who are you? Or all the things. Well, we all change. We all change throughout our life. We all asking ourselves sometimes, who am I? I'll say a bride, we work out like crazy leading up to our wedding. And then if children come soon, or just life happens and whatever, and then we're not working out as much, for us as females, our physical appearance is something that we can find security in or insecurity in unhealthy ways. So we can look at ourselves in the mirror and go, who am I? I don't look like myself that I felt. So then I don't feel worthy of his love. I don't feel worthy of his attention. I feel like he's wanting to hug me, but I don't feel like huggable. Like, don't hug me right now, because I need to go work out for 6 months before I want you to hug me again. There are processes that we can go through, you know what I mean, where we're questioning ourselves. So having the ability to open up conversations and communication in a way that frees them to know who they are and know that that hasn't changed for us, no matter what their physical being has changed, no matter what their mental state or the other attacks they're coming under from the outside. We know them to be this, and that we love that about them is, I think, super key.
That's very powerful. That's very powerful. So what I want to ask you is this: a lot of the advice that we're giving right now is around like being reactive. When something happens, this is how we should react to have the most positive outcome, to have the most successful outcome to the problem. What about being, and I guess what we're talking about is both proactive and reactive to some large extent, but do you have any strategies, maybe some things that you found maybe with your relationship with Gabe or with your work that you've had with other brides and other couples? What are some of the proactive things that you have found to lead towards having as few of these kind of conflicts as possible? You know, has there been things that you've discovered in your own experiences where you're like, yeah, we need to do more of this more often in order to avoid things from getting to a bad place?
Yeah, I think as you're studying your partner throughout this time, and I think that's the best way I can describe it, as you're studying your partner. And I feel like I feel like I was studying Gabe in a way of like, he is the most amazing human being I have ever encountered. How can I describe what I am watching? It's so amazing. And so I'm like watching that. I think he was studying me to understand and know me in a way that I just had never experienced before. And so things that he did proactively always surprised me, because I'm just thinking, well, it's because it's perfection. It just happens and whatever. And then I happened to hear him talking to a friend, giving advice about his friend's relationship. And this is when we were just married. And I remember even he was sitting in this recliner in the corner of our living room, and I'm walking back and forth, and Gabe is giving this advice to this friend. And every bit of advice he's giving, I'm thinking, oh my word, he did that on purpose. Like, he didn't just he did that on purpose. Oh my word. Like, it was such a revelation to me that none of the things that are happening are accidental in our relationship. They're purposeful by Gabe. And there was such a security that came in that moment for me. Because there's a fear that, well, it's just happening so perfectly. How does it just happen? And how do you keep it happening? I don't know. It's just happening, you know?
Right. And if it's just happening, it could just stop happening one day, right?
We have no
It could just
That's
stop.
right. We have no control over it.
If it's chance.
That's right. No control over it happening,
Right.
no control over it not. And so I remember just feeling, oh my goodness, I'm so thankful that I'm hearing this and knowing this is someone who's proactively doing certain things. And I thought that was super powerful. One of the things that Gabe is so good at and does proactively all the time to this day. Side note, when you do things proactively, it's not just a one time. Know that that's then how you're going to have to continue, and not just have to. It's I don't mean to say it in a negative way. You need to be prepared. It doesn't stop needing for you to do these things proactively. But one of the things that he does so well is preface. He prefaces everything. And he prefaces before he'll give advice, or before he disagrees, or before he maybe he said something, and the way I it's so much I have to work on in this, but like he'll say this and I'll be like, no, it's this, and I'll just kind of no, it's this and this, very very matter of fact. There's no question to it. It's just this. Right. And so he could very easily go, no, it's this. He could be like, right. No, it is this, and I'm telling you, it's this. But instead he tends to always say, oh, I hear that. Okay, so I'm going to throw something out there just to, consider. And if that doesn't match up, let me know. But what I was seeing was, and then he'll go into what he's saying. And it's just a small preface, but it takes it away from being this. You know what I mean? Right. It does. It takes it away to where it's like, I have now come down a little bit and I will listen, because he has, freed me to listen. If he doesn't do that and he goes, well, I think this and this and this, then we're in this battle, this ping pong match of what we. But when he says, oh, I'm going to throw this out there, it's something I was thinking. And again, if this is, and I want to hear why you're saying that? Is it because of he'll ask me questions or he'll share his advice or and it helps me open up. It helps me open up to what his opinion is or his perspectives. It helps me open up into why I was feeling fill in the blank. So I think prefacing is a skill that is so important. It's important for
Mm,
vendors and brides. It's important in conflicts, period. That's why I say their strength to them. That's part of a
mm,
preface. You know, when you say, what I love about you is this, this, and this, and I see that in this. Now, in this situation, I just have a few questions if I could throw out there for you. Are you thinking, and I'm going to ask questions. I've been amazed at how that has transformed my ability to solve a problem with another human being. Like
mm,
Gabe has done this for me, and I've experienced it and hit save on it and said, I'm going to do that with other people. And I have thought for sure this person was saying a certain thing or feeling a certain thing before. And I feel real confident about it because I'm an empath and I can feel into and I know. And so I'm going to say it. And I there's
right.
no other perspective in the world that it could be. This is it and I'm right. And and I'm absolutely wrong. And it's like, oh, I feel like such a fool. You know, anybody who answers a matter before they hear it,
Mm,
and to be a good question asker is the key. So no assumptions, questions being asked, and then further clarifying questions. And before you ask a clarifying question, I want if you can establish to restate to them what you hear. So here's the question, they give you an answer, restate to them, okay, so just to make sure I've got this right, you're saying da 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 da. Okay, so then let me ask one more question. Is it da 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 da? That allows someone to know, okay, I've been heard. They're not
mm,
against me. And now I can clarify more. They want to know more. And I will tell you that person will stay in that conversation a very long time, even if they historically have hated conflict, you know, because it's not
mm,
conflict. It's you trying to dig in to know them more. Um, and I think another thing when we're talking about extending the feeling of as you're planning your wedding, if we would spend more time together thinking of how to awaken in our partners the things that we loved before and the feelings that we loved before. I thought just the other day, what kind of text did I send when we were dating? You know,
yeah,
I don't think I've sent a text like that in a long time. Whether it's teasing or just a smile or different emojis or whatever it is, what am I trying to do when I text? Is it always, what time will you be home? Okay, so how are we doing dinner? And are we like all of the just necessities of life that things get boiled down to don't match at all the kind of texts or notes or emails or whatever it was that I was sending before. And I feel like, boy, I need to relish those things in my words to Gabe in my communications. I need to celebrate them again. I need to think of ways to say them again. He is such a beautiful wordsmith, and the cards I get from him, everything he writes in it is way better than what the card says. Like, he's so good at it. And I think, I've got to do that back. He's expressing love to me in those ways. He's telling me this is a way that I express love and receive love. I've got to work harder at doing that in small things. It doesn't have to be a big long card. It can be just a fun text that I send and surprise the fire out of him 17 years later. Do you know? Um,
mm,
and that's a hard. Girls, I think that we can forget those things. We can want them to continuously be done to us and for us, but we can forget how to take him off guard and
mm,
surprise and delight. So we want to continue those feelings 10 years later, we want to continue them. What are the activities? Doing the same thing,
mm,
seeing them again for the beautiful, handsome person that they are, and then finding the ways to have a way. Because I will tell you, in general, again, a generalization, I feel like um, Gabe is not alone in this. I think guys who are like, I've come to the altar and given that commitment forever, that every part of their fiber of their being is focused on that. They don't come
mm,
thinking, and about 5 years, I'm not so sure. they
Right.
you are the center of their universe in there. You are such a focus of that, and their commitment is real in those things. Um, if we could know that as brides, really deep inside us, and not think that the only reason they're saying those vows is because of the perfection of who we are, then
Mm.
then we could help ourselves stop operating in the fact of, well, I'm not that perfect bride anymore. I don't look the same, talk the same, act the same, whatever it is. Maybe something about you changed, and so you're not sure he should love you anymore, and you don't operate in the security of that. You think you almost want to distance yourself so he doesn't see your imperfections and stop loving you. And I think knowing that your imperfections are not going to make him stop loving you, that he absolutely does adore you, even when you don't feel worthy of it. And you act in what he sees in you and say, okay, you know what? I'm going to act cute, even though I don't feel cute. I'm going to act flirty,
Mm.
even though I don't feel flirty. I'm going to get dressed up, even though I don't feel like I like clothes on my body right now. I'm going to do those things and delight in them. And that's what he sees. He delights in that.
Mm.
He wants, when I'm lit up, he's lit up. And understanding we affect that connection, is key. And if he can't get that there, if that connection isn't there, and him feeling like he's able to make you feel amazing, he feels like a failure. So that,
Mm.
I think, affects. So anyway, those are things that slip by us when we feel like we look perfect, and that's during the wedding planning
So
process.
good. There's so much to unpack. God, you talk for like 5 minutes, and I have all these thoughts in my head. I'm like, it's all connecting. I feel like my brain's lighting up. It's like that scene in Good Will Hunting where you see like the numbers, like he's thinking, and you see all the numbers and everything going. That's how I feel.
Yeah.
So it's
as I'm talking, I'm like, doggone it, I'm gonna go send a fun text to Gabe. Like, it's very self-diagnosis right now is what it is.
But I want to hone in on that. So like, one of the biggest concepts that I've learned last couple of years towards anything is that most people believe that you have to feel inspired or you have to feel motivated before an action can take place, when in fact, research has shown us that it's actually the exact opposite. Wow. You have to take action to feel inspired. You have to take action to feel motivated. And especially as a creator myself, I'm a photographer, like that's something I think about a lot, because, you could very easily come to work today and say, I don't really feel like doing this thing, right? But once you get started doing it, then you become inspired. Wow. Then you become motivated. Oh, yeah. There's a reverse concept there. And it's funny how you mentioned things like, I'm gonna get dressed up to go out to dinner tonight, even though I don't really feel like getting dressed up. I'm gonna send that text, even though I don't really want to send that text, or I don't feel like I feel inspired or motivated to send that text. One of the things I did a couple of years ago was I went in my own personal calendar, and I found this to be a really big change in our relationship. And I would make a calendar reminder for myself to send a text, because it got to the point we were in that exact same place that you're talking about. It's funny that you're saying that, because it's exactly what happened to us. We get into our relationship, we start going into our everyday lives where we've got so much coming at us, right? And we're just problem solving, frankly. Like
surviving
day-to-day,
sometimes,
right? Surviving, right? And the same thing what you're saying, like we weren't sending text messages to each other. And I wish I could remember. This is not an original idea of mine. This is something I got from, it's probably a podcast or somewhere. But this is what I did. I started putting reminders in my phone that 3 times a week, somewhat random days or random times, it would say, hey, send a text to April. And so it would be anything. And even if I was just saying, hey, how's it going? Like, how's your day going? And then I would send a little GIF that was like, I feel like sleepy or something like that,
Right.
Even if it was nothing, it was just still trying to establish, getting, like you said, like this is, you beautifully said, which I hadn't thought about, is trying to move your current lifestyle back to when you fell in love with each other. And because you're right, like the way we communicated back then, both in person and digitally, like it's not the same as it is now. So it does get us back to that. Frankly, I was just trying to communicate more.
Which is so good.
like from a very basic
I love
place.
that you did that, because, when you said when you weren't talking about conflict, that affects, your communication period. So you took a proactive step to say, I want to do what I can do to make sure our communication. I love that. See, that's the thing. People can look at that. And I know maybe brides right now are listening to that going, are you kidding me? When you get married, you have to schedule texting to each other. Are you
Right.
kidding me? Like, that's the worst existence ever. No,
Right.
it's not. It's what we're talking about in this podcast. It's beyond the wedding that is so easy to forget and let go. And we don't realize that the person's value to us then can feel like it has been forgotten and let go. And what we're saying is this is how you, on purpose, continue to show that person how much they mean to them when life doesn't allow you to just naturally feel all the wonderful butterflies and whatever.
Right.
It doesn't allow you to.
Right.
And so what is the most important thing? Is it finding the next butterfly? I don't think so. It's saying no, it's deeper. And again, I have this quote. My shop in Virginia, the girls there surprised me. They sent me a gift. And I opened this gift here in Georgia and I just started crying. Gabe was standing right there. It was the most precious gift ever. And it's this quote. And I know, I'm sure I have said it on the other podcast too, but it's worth bearing. It bears so much value. I want to say it again. It's a quote of his that I love where he says, some people say that love grows, but actually love is more like gold. It doesn't grow, it purifies. And that quote is so powerful to me always because it's so true. When you get married, you know, the love that you're feeling right now as a couple, it is gold. It is gold. It's not less than the love you'll feel later. It's not as valuable as far as like it doesn't have the essence in it of what is valuable about gold, about the relationship itself. It's just that it will continue to go through fire. It will continue to go through things. And as that fire hits, it doesn't, because it's gold, it will just purify it. It will clarify. It will, and when gold is at its ultimate state, like its most pure state, it is completely transparent. You can see through it. And so when I think of our love and our marriages, I think, okay, we've got this clump and it has gold in it. And how do we keep purifying it to where there's nothing between us and that partner? It's completely transparent. There's nothing blocking the beauty of it. And it just shines to the rest of the world as well. And you can see through it. And so I say that like now are things that like, even the not maybe a conflict from the outside, but maybe just life and time being filled up with other things can cause us to not, you know what I mean, to forget that we need to make sure we are being open, transparent, on purpose. Let that time constriction or focus be something where we're like, I'm going to have to on purpose now send those texts. I'm going to have to on purpose now put that surprise note under his pillow, or at work, all of a sudden shows up a Snickers bar on his desk, or whatever it is, where it's like, that person is the person in my life that makes me say, we can, you know, your partner needs to be that person.
I think the thing I love so much about your analogy about love purifying, the fact that it has to go through fire to purify, is the concept that I've thought a lot about, is that acknowledging really anything that's going to end up being successful, there will be struggle associated with it. It has to go through the fire to do what it needs to do, right? There is, I do think, I think you said this earlier, there is this kind of a concept that I think a lot of couples have, which is, hey, it's working now, it's golden.
Yes.
We like, this is like, this is so easy.
Like, why is it hard for anybody else? Look how easy this is.
Right. Like, how would you ever get divorced?
Yeah.
Like, why would anybody ever do that? Like that. The concept is so foreign to you, and you don't, I think, realize kind of early on that you should embrace the struggle.
Oh, yeah.
Right. The way you go.
Yes.
I read this wonderful book called what was it called? It was called The Struggle is the Way, maybe, or The Obstacle is the Way.
Oh.
Right? The Obstacle is the Way. That was the name of the book. I'll send it to you. It's
great.
really great. But it parallels this concept really, really well, which is you are not really ever, it's not a realistic idea to ever go around an issue, to go around the struggle that you would face in your relationship. It's going to be through you intentionally making the right decisions, doing the things you should through the struggle. That's how your love purifies into gold. That concept is really beautiful, and it's really timely right now in my own life.
Man,
so,
yeah. That's so good. It
It's
makes when you were describing like how it feels when you're getting married and you're like, why does anybody have any problems? I remember being at
right,
restaurants and seeing an older couple sitting there eating and not talking. And I remember saying to Gabe, we will
right,
never be that couple. Like, we're not, look,
right,
how do they just sit there? That is, oh my goodness. And look at
right,
us. We're talk, 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 talk.
right,
You know what I mean? But sometimes at
right.
the end of the day, you're like, we made it through the day and we're just sitting there eating and not saying anything. And we're just like enjoying the quiet. And I'm like, are we that old couple? Oh my word. Are we that old couple where we're not talking? Um, but life can just be that way. Sometimes, yeah, it's nice to just sit quietly and not talk. But other times it's like, wait a minute, how did we talk so much? Why was I so excited about every idea that came out of his head? Guess what? I get to still sit across the table from that person. I need to help pull out those ideas. I need to help get excited
Mm,
about what he says instead of just like, yeah, that's great. Okay. I got to enter into it more. So I think you're talking about those obstacles. The obstacle many times is just life itself. They're good things. They're not
mm,
bad things. It's just good things that are just now more of them. Children being one of them, like that can come in. So anyway, I think it's important no matter what the obstacle that's been thrown into your way. And maybe it's disagreements with in-laws. Maybe it's,
mm,
loss of position or job. Maybe it's not inability to have children. Maybe it's things that then try to fight for your focus emotionally and physically and mentally. Those things happen. Don't act like, well, that shouldn't have happened. It's going to happen. Like what you're saying, Nathan, that obstacle will be there. Now, what do we do? Now what do we do?
mm,
And I'm going to look at you and say, okay, I'm going to do these things on purpose because these still are important to me. These are very important to me, and I'm going to
mm,
show you they are. I think there's nothing more loving,
mm,
honestly, than scheduling something. Because
mm. Yeah.
we can surprise each other, great. But the schedule of like, I'm showing you that on purpose, even if it's just myself, like he doesn't know I'm scheduling it. It's saying I'm on purpose taking these steps. And that keeps your heart open towards your partner, I think, in some powerful ways. So brides hit save on it.
Yeah.
Grooms hit save on it.
Yeah. So we're wrapping up here. We've been recording for about an hour. I want to be respectful of you and your
Mm.
time. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you being here. The last question I have for you is this: like we've been kind of dancing around this topic of asking questions, right? Do you have any concepts or any tools around asking better questions, right? Like there's a quote. It probably came from Aristotle or Socrates or one of the incredible philosophers. I'm sure Gabe probably knows.
Yeah, I'm sure.
So
I'm sure.
if I mess this up, I'm sure. Tell him to send me a text or an email or something, and he can correct me. But it's something along the lines of, show me a successful man, and I'll show you a person who can ask better questions or great questions. It's something along those lines, right? So like, around this topic of improving communication, conflict resolution within marriage, how do we get to the point of asking quality questions? Because I do think, asking some question is a great start, right? Like that's fantastic. But have you ever spent any time kind of thinking about how do I ask better questions? How do I ask more engaging questions?
I think I love this question, by the way. So you're very good at asking questions. Pretty soon there will be a bust of Aristotle and a bust of Nathan. That's what's going to happen. It's like there's going to be those things. But I think the first thing to ask good questions, I feel, is to first hone our observation skills, period. So if we can observe better, talk less, observe more, then we will start to see certain things that this person is doing, not doing, saying, not saying, that bring up a question. Does that make sense? So
Yeah.
but if we don't observe, if we're not slow to speak in a way, then we make all sorts of assumptions that can embarrass us or make us look foolish or make us look heartless or make us look whatever to the other person, ignorant. So first, having a desire to ask questions is key. Got to have that first instead of being the desire to give all the answers. One of my children is Ava is she's the youngest, and so she always feels like she's the one learning and never teaching, and so she wants to teach all the time, and so she wants to come in and just tell people all these things, and it's like saying, listen, how did you ask them any questions about themselves? What are they? And she's like, no. And I'm like, no, yeah, you're just focused on talking about yourself. So it's a maturing factor of like, first go in and observe, be a good observer of what this person is doing, and then you have so many more things to ask about the why of what they're doing, or the how of what they're doing, or how it connects to this and this, and help. Your questions can help break down their process in a way that maybe the person has
Mm.
never done before. They have to
Yes.
break down their process, and that is empowering both to that person and to you, because then all of a sudden you've got a nice stepwise motion. You didn't live their life, so you don't even know all the steps that it took to get them to this point. So being able to say, wow, I have seen this and this, and I think it's amazing. I've experienced this and this from you. That's been amazing. So how did you, and then asking those questions, so verbalizing what we've observed so that we can give context to the question, and asking that type of a question where we're really wanting to learn from them based on what we've observed shows such a respect and an honor.
Mm.
It's not a challenging question then. It's one of, I want to sit at your feet and listen and learn more. And there is nothing more respectful and honoring to another human being than to say, I want to learn more, not only to follow or improve my life based on what you tell me, but in a relationship, in a marriage relationship, to know you more. Another reference that I know Gabe takes very seriously is that husbands are to be with their wives, and in Scripture talks about to dwell with them according to knowledge. So Gabe's passion and obsession has been, since we've gotten married, I want to know her more. How can I know her
Mm.
more so that I can dwell with her in the knowledge of her, instead of assumptions or whatever it is? Um, and when he asks me those questions, I can feel that he wants to know. He wants to hear. He wants to understand. There's a hope in the questions that you ask. Conversely, asking questions in a assumptive way, in a way that has an attitude to it, in a way that says, well, why did you do that? Then it's almost
Mm.
accusatory. It's almost like, that makes no sense.
Mm.
There's so many words you can put in that kind of tone. So your tone and how you approach is a key thing with asking good questions. A good question has the best of the other person at heart. It assumes the best about the other person's motives, goals, life choices, whatnot, and ask the question in such a way of wanting to learn more about them, wanting to learn inside them better. And then
Mm.
when that's your motive, when that's your approach, the words of the question become less important, because you can figure out the words as you go, that you can flesh out the question, and you'll have a lot of freedom to do so. It's a little bit similar, I want to say, to when somebody proposes. It's not so much the words of the proposal that bring the yes as it is the relationship and the
So
freedom,
true.
leading up that brings the yes. So yes, the words can be well chosen, and I think that's great. The approach, the relationship, the freedom, the hope, the excitement, the energy that you're bringing to the question is even more so important. But
Mm.
before we speak, we've got to watch. We've got to observe and listen and try to hear with our whole being, and then clarify further with questions. So, yeah, observing, prefacing, saying back what you hear.
Wendy, so good. Thank you
Mm.
so much. Oh my goodness. Like there's so much there that I'm gonna be thinking about and pondering on and writing for myself, to try to figure out like how can I implement some of these
Mm.
strategies that you're talking about into my own relationship and my own
Mm.
marriage to make it better. So I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. One final
Yeah.
question is, are there any books or any resources that have been very influential in the way you think and the way you process things when it comes to building a better relationship? Is there any resources that you might want to pass on to the audience of a good place to go and check out something?
Well, I mentioned this on the last podcast too, and I hold to it just now. If you haven't jumped and gotten this, if you're listening and haven't gotten this, I would highly suggest it, because I think I've watched it, I want to say 8 or 9 times, and still digest more and more. And it's Laugh Your Way to a Better Marriage. That right there is incredible resource. I actually use it in coaching businesses as well. It's
Mm.
just a powerful opportunity to understand your strengths, understand what motivates you, understand other strengths and how it motivates them, and curate language that helps you connect in those things. So that's been super powerful. Every couple should read it. I think another thing, of course, everybody probably has heard of the Five Love Languages. That book is easy to read, but it's so worth reading over and over again and really understanding again how to show love to the person. Those are easy disconnects that happen, which are super great. But so those two right off the top of my head. There's a little fly in here. There's one that
I could.
No, go ahead.
Oh,
go
no,
ahead.
go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I can personally attest Five Love Languages and Laugh Your Way to a Better. So I had already read Five Love Languages, and it was transformative for me and my wife. It was transformative. It was so good. You're right. Very easy to read. You can probably sit down and read it in a day if you really wanted to, for sure. And then Laugh Your Way to a Barren Marriage. I took your suggestion. It was fantastic. It was really good. So I just wanted to give my little stamp of encouragement for people to go check that out.
And if you watch it, like if you're leading up to marriage and you watch it, you're going to get about this much of it leading up into your wedding, right? Like you'll get this much, and it'll be funny and it'll be great, and there'll be little things you take away, and then you need to rewatch it like all the time. Like just rewatch it, because
once a year, put it on the calendar.
Just bring couples over, have a charcuterie board, have fun, and just watch it together again, because you'll experience things. Nathan and I were talking about this, I think, before we were actually on the podcast itself. We were talking about how you can hear something in life, but then you miss it because you haven't experienced something that relates to it yet. And so then when you hear that same thing again later and you're like, oh, that's the best thing I've ever heard, and then realize, oh, it was said before, but I didn't get it because I didn't need it then. So watch more and more with that, because you'll experience more that you're like, oh, that's the answer in those resources. So hopefully it'll be helpful. And listen to Nathan. Nathan is got an incredible podcast. Listen, whatever it is that you want to know about anything related to weddings, but then beyond, this podcast is just full of those things. I know on this one, we really kind of focused on the relationship, and it was purposeful on Nathan's part and on mine to kind of dig on this side of it, because there's a lot of information about vendors, but for us, we know that brides are excited and grooms are excited right now about their relationship itself. And let's talk about how to extend that as far as we can into the wedding. And oh, side note, never stop trying to get counsel. Sometimes we do premarital counseling before the wedding. And then we wait for things to go down really bad before we reach out for counseling. And something that Gabe mentioned before was that he was like, I hope we do counseling throughout our whole marriage and never actually face the ginormous problems, because we're staying, it's almost like physical fitness. You're staying that way. You don't have to recover so drastically. And it's not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of continuing strength, I think.
I don't want to take any more of your time. Can I ask you, do you have any tips on how to find a good marriage counselor? Because that's isn't that, because I think that like the first issue is like people don't know where to start. They don't, and it's obviously it's very vulnerable, right? Like it's a very vulnerable environment where you're going and you're having to, talk with somebody about really the most intimate parts of your own personal life, stuff that you would never share with anybody else. So I feel like for a lot of people, the reason that they don't do it is just because they have no idea how to find that right person to go and get help from or to talk with.
I think the first thing I think we can do is there are a lot of great counseling helps just on YouTube. So that's a good first step, where you'll have like 15 or 20-minute videos that you can watch while you're eating breakfast or something. And you're just pouring into your relationship some good, positive, helpful advice that then also is fun to talk about after that. And then you're not having to necessarily take the step where it's all laid out in front of somebody yet. You know what I'm saying? But continually pouring into the relational quality of your relationship, whether it's through books or through podcasts or through just YouTube. There's tons out there. There's the one guy that talks about narcissism, and there have been different things in relationships in the past of my life that affected me from people who were in that narcissism category, if you had to categorize them. And so watching how that affects an empath is really important to know. So, helping to understand us as individuals and then us as couples is super key. And then I would say, just a cautionary, I don't even know if this is worth being on the podcast or not, but just a cautionary tale. be careful who you idolize, because it can be very disconcerting to have someone that you idolize then fall or change, or then
Yeah.
you can question so many things about yourself, So stay solid in between the two of you, but be careful who you idolize. And that's super key too. But locally, I know there's a lot of choices with counselors. I find personal recommendations from other people are the best. So in your own area, if there's somebody that they say, oh, I love this person or whatnot, great. Find out who they are if you want to go talk to somebody and have a regular counselor in that way. Um, but
Yeah.
again, as long as the two of you are excited and focused on developing your relationship, then podcasts and books and YouTube doesn't take a ton of time, and it helps keep you
Right.
there. And then I would just say, go to a marriage retreat at some point. Just go to a couples retreat where you get to get away for a weekend and dig into some things you wouldn't in everyday life, um,
I love that.
and that
Yeah.
would help.
That's so good. Wendy, you're an
Oh,
inspiration. Oh my
Nathan, you
gosh,
very much
you
are
are.
too.
You're such an inspiration. I could talk to you all day long. Yeah, it's funny when you talk about seeing a marriage counselor and Gabe's comment. It's always been funny to me. It's like if you're sick, you would go see a
Sure.
doctor. Like if like you would go see a professional who. A lot of people have, we have a financial counselor, like to help us with
Yes.
finances. Like there are people out there to help you with the things that you don't feel comfortable with and that you don't know how to
Yes.
handle. That's not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of strength to know that you
Yeah.
need the help.
I look at somebody who has a personal
that you need the
trainer
assistance.
all the time. They just always have a personal
Yeah.
trainer or workout buddy or whatever.
Right.
They're the good
Right.
ones. They're the
Right.
consistent people who are killing it in
Right.
life.
That's right.
Like, why do I have to
That's
wait till
right.
I'm obese before I'm like, maybe I should get a personal trainer? Like, just keep the personal trainer. Again, this is a wonderful podcast
That's
for
so
me to
good.
put a mirror up and go, yeah, Wendy, that's right. Yep. Whoever's talking out of your mouth, you need to listen to them and go do it. Gracious.
That's so
Gracious.
good. All right. Well, so I want to finish with Wendy. Where can people find more information about you? Please tell us just a little bit about your podcast really quickly. I know that you guys are on a little bit of a pause, but you're about to start back up. So kind of wrap up by telling people where they can find you and interact with you more.
Yes. We, my husband and I started a podcast called Love and Freedom. And it absolutely has, some people maybe think that it has to do with like patriotism. It's not.
No.
It's not patriotism. We even thought about, okay, should we tweak the name? But we can't. We keep coming back to this concept of how the two are so inexorably linked. What love actually is, and how freedom, it gives freedom, and what freedom looks like, and what freedom is, and the responsibilities that come with freedom, and just all of those interactions. So it was, but it is more focused on brides and grooms, and like during this time, or just relational skills, and taking and extracting principles from when we were dating and early on in our relationship that helped. Now that we've continued, are married for going on 17 years. September 4th will be 17 years. And those of you who have heard the Love and Freedom podcast when we first started launching it, July 22nd was yesterday, and July 22nd is the day we celebrate every year. That's the day we knew we loved each other. So that was it's a big day. That's the one we celebrate the 22nd of every month, because it's the day we knew we loved each other. But July 22nd is the actual day. So anyway, we talk together, and you'll get to hear Gabe. And Gabe is so funny and engaging. And I'll just ask questions, get him talking, and then I'll pull out those amazing crystallization of thought that he'll do. And we're going to be starting that back up. We moved to a different house, and so there was a whole period of how all that went down. So now that we're in our forever home, we're starting back up with the podcast. It's called Love and Freedom, and we can't wait to jump back in and get that going. But then also, on the wedding professional side, Do You Speak Bride? We love helping to whatever the wedding professional is facing, where it's a struggle or something that's not going the way they want with brides. We love coming in and helping to navigate that to where that connection is stronger and better for both parties. And then being able to be on some of the Bride Life podcasts to help brides in their understanding of their approach to weddings and relationship as well, and extend it into life is another focus. But I would say Love and Freedom, you get to hear Gabe, and that's the best part of my day, like is coffee with Gabe. I have so much audio recording on my phone of him. He'll start talking at our kitchen island, and I just hit record. It's so great.
Well, Your podcast is amazing. When we recorded our last episode, I went and listened. It not only was it very helpful, it was also very entertaining. And that's a hard balance to strike. Yeah. So you guys did it very well. And hats off to both you and Gabe. And again, when I say you're an inspiration, the number of people that you're helping out there with all the different ventures that you have, it's really incredible. So thank you so much for all the work that you're doing for wedding professionals and for couples. It's really amazing. It's a lot to be proud of.
Same for you, Nathan. It's always a joy. I can't wait to just keep doing podcasts together for, years and years to come. And we'll have you on Love and Freedom. We'll have to have a conversation there. We'll get you and April on here and talk together with Gabe. That would be super fun. We'll do that.
It would be a blast. Yeah, it would be a huge honor. Well, Wendy, thank you so much. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. And I know that this is going to help a lot of people. I hope you have a great day.
Thank you.
And I'm sure I'll be talking to you again
I can't wait. Thanks, Nathan.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us today. We hope that you learned a lot that may help you in your journey of wedding planning. If you'd like to find out more information about me, you could check out angledlightphotography.com. I'd also like to encourage you to join our newly formed Facebook group made just for the listeners of this podcast. You can find it by going to Facebook and searching for Weddings from the Pros Podcast Group. We will see you there.